Welcome to Talking with the Experts. Here we discuss all things business, by business owners, for business owners. Here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello, welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com.au. Talking with the Experts is all about business, by business owners, for business owners. You can find it on all podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today my guest is Ken Lever, and we're going to be discussing about how to bootstrap your business. And his business, Reviv, is apparently making a lot of money. So we'll just see how he goes. Now, Ken's journey has taken him across the globe, from strategy consulting to being a CEO to leading product teams at high growth companies. He's also launched and scaled 6 startups of his own. So when it comes to understanding how to grow a business from the ground up, Ken is a seasoned expert. Currently, Ken runs Reviv, a direct-to-consumer brand focused on dental biomechanics and health. Alongside this, he's acting as a fractional COO and head of tech for a venture-funded solar startup, showcasing his ability to balance multiple high-impact roles. Ken, welcome to Talking with the Experts. I am excited to find out how you bootstrap this business and how you're making a profit already.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. I think this was a classic one of something that was never really meant to be a business. I had a health issue for about 10 years, and it was a very big passion of mine. And I decided to create a Substack about it in the summer of last year. So about a year ago. And I was just writing, and then a couple of the posts did really well. And then a friend of mine was like, "Hey, Ken, like, why not just sell? If you think a mouth guard is going to help, just create one and sell it." So I quickly went to Alibaba, sourced something that was relatively cheap, did the minimum MOQ of like 200 or 300, and just would create. I created like a very basic Shopify site and linked to it from my Substack. And sure enough, like one of my next posts went semi-viral on Substack, and we were selling, like we sold out almost. And I was like, wow, these things actually sell. So why don't I, double down? And so we ordered more, and then we designed our own one, and now we're about 9, 10 months on, and we sell probably around 400 a day now. Shopify has been the oldest channel, but TikTok Shop has been explosive. Like, I almost think we could do $1 million a month just on just on TikTok Shop US. Like, it's crazy what's happening on TikTok Shop. And we're just trying to keep up. Like, the biggest issue we have is not growth, it's just where do we get the cash, like working capital. But yeah, and it's been profitable every month except one. And I'm kind of the sole employee, so I work in this way that everyone's a freelancer, and I just pay them for what they do. And it works quite well.
So what is Reviv? What does it do?
So this is what's interesting about it, and why I think it's done quite well, is Reviv itself. We sell 2 different mouth guards, and they're kind of like, they almost look like boxing guards, but they're more for sleeping and protecting your teeth and anti-clenching and grinding. And you'll find a lot of mouth guards that are relatively similar on, Amazon or wherever. Like, there's nothing new about selling a mouth guard like this. But what is new is my story. And my story was the one that, 10 years ago, 11 years ago in 2014, I had TMJ. I was diagnosed with TMJ in 2013. And I had been given like a dental splint from my dentist, and I chewed through it. I had just moved to Vietnam, and I went to a new Vietnamese dentist, and I asked him to make a new one, and the new one didn't work quite the same. And then he asked me, like, hey, he was a TMJ expert, and he said, hey, let me adjust your contacts of your teeth. And I let him do it as I was checking my phone. I didn't think anything of it. And he like drilled quite a bit off my teeth, my cusps off the back teeth. And I'd say within a month, I had brain fog so thick that I couldn't retain any information. And I was 37, right? Like, I'd been an adult for quite a while and lived my life relatively healthy and everything. And then the single incident, like, so I couldn't retain any information. I had asked to be demoted 2 levels in my job, and I was still awful because I just like if you told me something was out of my head 2 minutes later and it was scary. But I also became like, I went from a social guy my entire life to being a hermit. And my neck and my body had changed. Like I looked like I'd aged about 10 years in like 2 months. And I stayed like that for about 6 months. And then it was my journey trying to figure out why did this happen? Like, why are my teeth so important? How did that trigger? And I figured it out after, almost a decade of going up and down as I was trying different things on myself. And I realized that like the way your teeth come together are very important for human health in general, and that wearing a simple mouth guard has massive health benefits beyond just protecting your teeth or keeping you from clenching or grinding. And so, like, there's over 20,000 people that bought a mouth guard from us. We have hundreds of, you know, screenshotted testimonials of people fixing things like crazy things like people coming out of OCD, people coming out of ADHD, people coming out of like I have one guy that pretty much fixed dementia. People are trying to fix cancer, and then lots of like people that have already fixed sleep apnea. They, like brain fog. I think we've killed brain fog about 30 times. Like we haven't lost against brain fog once. So it sounds crazy, and it's literally just a mouth guard, but it's this story and teaching people that like, oh, and the other thing is it straightens your teeth. All right. So just wearing a simple mouth guard will expand your palate, which a lot of youngsters want, and it'll straighten your teeth the natural way, whereas braces and aligners are really damaging. So we're also educating about people about that, and probably like 30-40% of people are just like people that were damaged by braces or aligners, um, and are now fixing it with us and have even straighter and more aligned teeth. So yeah, it's like this education that a simple mouth guard does a lot more, which is behind why we're growing like this.
I mean, it's an online shop basically that sells these mouth guards.
Well, I would say that we're a bit more. So we're also a paid community. So the reason that I'm able to collect all this data is we have a school community which has a little less than 2,000 people. So we sell paid access. It's about $10 a month. And so people are sharing their stories, and that's where I get all these testimonials and things. And then also people can pay for me to track their journal. So about 1,600 people have paid for me to track their journal, and every week I read their journal entries because it's kind of like it's a lot harder than you would think to sleep with a mouth guard. Like, your teeth hurt, your gums hurt, you start having headaches, all these things happen. You got to just like coach them through it.
Yeah, okay. So I guess starting bootstrapping, which maybe people don't know what bootstrapping is, but that is where you start with no money and you just uh, start where you stand.
Yeah.
Right. So how did you go about doing that? So other than your Substack articles and opening a shop, what else did you do to be able to generate a profit so quickly?
So I mean, it was a part-time business and I was doing this fractional COO role that you mentioned. So that was keeping the bigger income coming in, so I could make sure that I didn't have to like live off my savings or something. So I would say that took the pressure off, right? And then like my only costs were the cost of a Shopify site, the most basic plan, the cost of the inventory. And then I wasn't even paying for ads at the beginning because my Substack was free. So, right from the first month, even though our sales were not huge, we were profitable. And then when I bought more and more, we started doing paid ads on Meta, but they were profitable. So, even like when we were running things through ads, they were profitable on the first order. So as soon as we saw, wow, like we can advertise this thing and make profit on the first order, like then you can just scale. Then it became a question of like how much can we scale just on Meta? And we kind of like plateaued. And then we said, all right, let's look at TikTok Shop. Let's look at Amazon in the US. And now we're on all those channels. Um, and so it was just this gradual kind of testing with relatively low amount of money and me using very inexpensive labor, like people from, Pakistan and Philippines mainly to do some of the operational work, like customer support and pushing out content. So this is kind of how we did it. And one thing I think is interesting. So I had been contracting for 4 or 5 years, and I was this fractional COO. So I had implemented into a VC-backed startup in the Philippines this system that I'd been using where we use ClickUp, which is this Australian like project management tool. And so the way I've been running teams for a number of years, which is how I run Revive, is that we use a system that I called everything is a task. And so literally everything in the company, like ClickUp is this, like folder structure. And we have things for marketing, for sourcing, for operating, all these different buckets. And anything that anyone does in the company is a task that gets assigned, and then like there's a status, and then the other rule is like anytime anyone works on a task, it needs to be an update to the task. Usually it's a comment. And I'm following those updates. And so by using this system, they allocate time and therefore cost to these tasks. And I don't pay for any latency. I don't have like any employees. I don't pay anyone the set amount. And it ends up being super efficient. We don't have any meetings. Like the other thing is our rule is we don't invest into relationships or culture, which is very antithesis because I'd grown up in the corporate world and I'd seen how like I used to work in these big offices and people would hate each other. And I might even like there'd be like two people, I knew them both, they were great people, and they would hate each other. And like that would affect the whole like how the whole office worked and like who took sides on what. It was awful. And I was like, all right, when I build my own companies, I'm gonna get rid of this thing. And nobody's gonna know each other because politics for me are a weed that grows on this fertile soil called relationships. And if nobody has a relationship, like there's no weed called politics. So that's how we operate.
All right. It's an interesting concept because I know I used to do some outsourcing for a company in Melbourne, and they, you had to be at a meeting every morning, and you had to tell where you'd, where you, what kind of work you'd done, and how you'd progress with a particular task, and it was really time consuming. You just couldn't get on with your day without going to this meeting first. And to me, I found that I couldn't work as I was being micromanaged, and there's nothing worse than being micromanaged. You just can't get on with your day. And so your concept sounds absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and I would say like there's two sides to this, right? One is that I sit in no meetings, neither does anyone else, which is great. Like I used to sit in, yeah, I was like a pretty senior person in a couple of companies, and I would sit in meetings like 90% of my day. I wouldn't get anything done. And meanwhile, like things are just, backlogging up, sitting, waiting for you. But the other thing is about micromanagement, like I have more, I've managed teams for 20 something years, right? I've managed hundreds of people the old way, and now I've managed hundreds of people this new way the last 4 or 5 years. I get so much more detail about what they do. So in some ways, like you can look at like I'm micromanaging times 100 because the rule is everything is a task. Any work anyone in the company does is a comment. So they literally have to account for everything they've done. And I'm following most of it. But like when you find out, when you operate this way for a while, like people love it. Like it's almost kind of rewarding when you do work, you put in a comment, and like I do what's called micro adjusting. So if you're kind of starting to slow down a certain path or you have a question, there's no point, like you just put in a comment like, hey, I'm not sure whether I should do this or that. And I'm clearing my notifications pretty much real time, like every hour or two. So they get unblocked and they don't waste their time doing the wrong thing. And nobody does something that is not prioritized because that used to happen all the time in these big companies. Like someone's working on something that's not that important. Now, like it's very clear, like a status either prioritized or it's in backlog. So I know that all the money I'm spending is creating value. Like I'm not paying a single salary cent on something that's not prioritized and creating value.
Hmm. Yeah, I think maybe some people could take a leaf out of your book, perhaps.
Oh, I'm telling you, I consider myself a decent manager the old way. But you couldn't drag me kicking and screaming to work the other way. Like I think I could. Like there's not a single manager I've worked for or with that using this system. I don't think I could blow them out. Like it's just like different level. I'm like dealing with so many different things. I can manage like 40 people at the same time without even like while going home on time. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe you could sell that concept.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about doing that, and like this is why I kind of did sell that concept, right? Like the reason that they hired me as the fractional COO at this venture backed, they raised a couple $1 million, was to implement this system, and it worked great. Of course, I didn't have full, like there was a CEO, so I didn't have the full leverage, so I didn't do it exactly the way I wanted. But like I've implemented this in tech companies in Southeast Asia a few times, and it's worked great. But like it never worked as well as when I had my own company. I could do it exactly the way I want. And so now I just see it's like, all right, I could either like charge a relatively small amount to other people uh to implement this system in their company, or I can create like I plan to create Reviv into like at least $100 million company. Like I'll get a lot more value doing it this than like teaching a bunch of other people to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you want to find out more about Reviv, you want to go to Ken's website at getreviv.com and Get Reviv. Reviv is spelled R-E-V-I-V. So you don't put an E on the end, but otherwise you won't find it. So go getreviv.com, or you can find Ken on LinkedIn. Now, you want to share something and promote something from your website, Ken?
No, I think people like if you're interested in the health stuff, I have a Substack. So Reviv, reviv.substack.com. I think there's a lot of interesting articles, and that's kind of like where to wet your feet and see if this is applicable to you.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing about your concept about work and how you bootstrap this business, because it is very interesting. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Rose.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time.